No, no, record, record. Hi. Hey, good morning. Hey, good morning. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Of course, I'm applying my lip gloss because that's what girls do. We put on our lip glosses. So while we wait to join our regular audience, thank you so much. It is Thursday morning, and if I sound a little bit, I should. Do you know what happened this morning? Y'all know. Guess. We only have a few more seconds before I join our other streaming platforms. So give me just a few seconds here as we get ready to join our other platforms. It's almost time and it's going to start counting down in just a bit. But can you just imagine what happened here in Michigan overnight? At least in southeast Michigan. Up north in northern Michigan, they're used to stuff. But the snow is back. Right? The snow is back. Not exactly sure, but the snow is back. And the snow is back. So thanks, everybody. Welcome to Down to Earth with Harriet Kemick. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I want to thank you so much for being part of our broadcast this morning and to talk about the issues that matter. It's kind of I'm trying to get out of the funk of accepting that it's winter. See, here in Michigan, we have two seasons. We have winter and construction. Winter and construction. I kid you not. We don't really see spring and summer. It's kind of like it just goes and then you see like a few days when it feels spring-like and then boom, next thing you know, it's hot. And then after that, it just gets rainy. And then you have like in July, maybe 2 intense weeks of heat. And then before you know it, there you are again. And it starts getting cool. And then you're like, wow, well, I guess summer passed a whole 2 weeks later. And then before you know it, it's all construction. It's either winter or construction. Those are the only two seasons that we tend to have here in Michigan. So I'm not really happy this morning because I had to wake up to see snow. Not fun. And it was falling. I mean, it was coming down in droves out of the sky. Like the sky literally rained snow this morning. And I'm not complaining because I know folks in the Central Valley in California have not seen snow and have no water. And folks in New Mexico saying that wish that it could be. It could have waited till January. It could even have waited till December. Last year, we didn't see snow until December. And all of a sudden now we have snow, dudes. Snow. Oh, like it started yesterday. And then it flooded a little bit. But this morning it was full on. And now they're saying that because it snowed and then it gets cold, so the snow hardens, it becomes icy. And we've forgotten how to drive on these conditions, right? So there were multiple crashes on I-96 coming from Lansing this morning at 12 mile and 13 mile. People forgetting that you can't see it. It's black ice, people. Say black ice. You can't see it, but it's there. Because if it snowed and then it got cold, there's ice, so be careful. So as for me, I'm not on the freeways. I'm taking the mile roads and keeping my driving around certain areas, right? Incredible. Say incredible. So anyway, we're rolling and we're getting there. And daylight saving times is, I hate it. I think they need to stop it. It's a serious waste of time. Every year I have to go through this rhythm of setting my clock. So, you know, the clock in my living room, I never change it all year. I can't be bothered. Who's going to lift that clock down and go change it? No, I leave it. So it's been on Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight. It stays on it all day. It stays on it all year round. I kid you not, because by the time you change it, it's back again. I'm not into that fuss. I'm sick and tired of daylight savings time. I'm so tired of it. I wish they would pay some attention to it, right? Today on our show, I know I'm just kind of mouthing off because I really don't like the snow. But today on our show, we're going to talk about the commutation of sentences. And recently, as you know, Oklahoma decided, the governor of Oklahoma had campaigned on the promise that he would commute prison sentences of low-lying offenders. So, nonviolent crimes and certain drug-based offenses, and certainly people for whom this was their first time in the system. And he lived up to that promise. Last Friday, they had a meeting at the prison board and they read out the names of 526 individuals. So on Monday, en masse, 400 people walked out of prison, some of whom had been in jail for stuff like marijuana possession, some of whom had been in jail. This was their first time. And they walked out. Now, I've read the article. It didn't say anything about their record being expunged. But what he did say was that it was going to help them. So I imagine that there is some expungement that will take place later. Some of whom, and he did, tell them that don't come back here. We don't want to see you back here. Right? And it makes me think that isn't this something that the rest of the country should adopt? Like people who, as far as I'm concerned, right? And I am asking you, you are my listeners and my viewers, right? Don't you think that people who smoked weed, marijuana, don't you think that they shouldn't go to jail for that? Now, I'm not talking about the guy who is in his trailer out back cooking meth. He's a disaster waiting to happen. If you're going to seriously sit there and cook meth, you probably should do some time for that. You see what I mean? And don't tell me it's economics and Harry, you don't know how desperate people can get and so on. Baby, we've all been there. That doesn't mean I'm going to go cook meth in my garage or cook meth in my back room or in my basement or something. So I'm talking about people who perhaps smoked marijuana, probably sniffed some cocaine, and then they were caught, and now they're in jail. They have no priors. They've never been to jail before. And going to jail is a sentence, it's a life sentence. Because when you emerge from jail, you can't rent a house, you can't rent an apartment. Did you know you can't get certain types of loans? You can't get if it's drug related offense, you can't get a student loan to go back to school, to go to college. If it's a drug related offense, there's certain kinds of loans you can't get for cars. You can't get credit cards. You can't get certain kinds of prison sentences. You can't buy a house. You can't get a loan to buy a house. Obviously, in some places, you can't get a job. So recently here in Michigan, they started this movement to rid the box, to ban the box, the box on applications that says, do you have any prior criminal offenses? And I personally don't think you should ban the box. I think the box needs to stay there because there's some people who have not been rehabilitated. There's some kinds of crimes that are not rehabilitative. Let's just be clear. There are some people who have serious issues. People who are serial killers cannot be rehabilitated. People who are serial rapists cannot be rehabilitated. The only place that works for them is jail, right? There are people who murder people. I'm not talking about people who kill in self-defense because their husband was attacking them. I'm talking about people or the girlfriend was attacking them. I'm talking about people for whom this is a blood sport, right? So when you look at some of these sentences that people get for stuff like marijuana possession, kids on a college campus are out having fun one night and they get pulled over and they get something called a minor in possession. Minor in possession, that ruins someone's life forever. Now they're expelled from campus, from college. They can't go anywhere. They can't work anywhere. Certain kinds of places, you can't work some places, right? I think we need to do an overhaul of what prison should be about. I think that's where there are too many people in prison. Did you know that the population of prisons is way too much? Oklahoma had the highest incarceration rates in the country. Then, of course, there's Mississippi and Louisiana, Arkansas, Bama, and Michigan, right? So what we have noticed over the years is that the places that have the highest incarceration rates have the highest prison population. So we need to look at, what are people going to jail for? What is prison? That somebody educated me and told me jail is a different thing. Jail is county, right? Pulled over, don't have your documents or whatever, or some minor offenses. And then prison federal, where you serve time based on the kind of how long you're going to be in prison for. If it's more than a year, that's a felony, right? Now, and I know it makes some of us very uncomfortable, especially for people of color. It's all too familiar because we almost can identify with someone who has spent time in jail. I used to think it was an anomaly. Seriously, my friends, serious, don't judge me. I used to think it was an anomaly. I didn't realize how many people knew someone in jail around me until I started asking. I started asking questions, and I found out people could say, well, my brother, my ex-boyfriend, my husband or my ex-husband, my uncle, my father, my son. You know what I mean? And it started to make me think. So I started asking questions. Well, what did they go to jail for? Because I'm trying to understand, do we have a problem with prisons? Do we have a prison mentality in the society? Or are people seriously committing some dangerous crimes? So then I had to ask myself, well, what are people going to jail for? So you and I are driving down the road and you see somebody pulled over, right? Now, if there's an outstanding warrant for them, like recently, did you all see the story that happened somewhere in Michigan recently, where a woman did not return her library books? And she failed to understand how much that was a crime. So she was working and her boss was going to promote her and decided to do a background check. And when he did the background check, they found out that there was a warrant out for her arrest. So he notified her and she laughed it off. She said, you got to be kidding me. Is this a joke? And he said, no, seriously. When she went to check it out, because she hadn't returned the library book, there is a charge on the books for what? Theft of rental property. Hello. So guess what? She was locked. There was a warrant out for her arrest where she could actually serve time. Is that something that people should go to jail for, not returning library books? And you refer to that as theft of rental property? So if I go to the local library and I borrow a book, and knowing me, I'll intend to return the book and it sits in the back of my car for 4 weeks. When I lived in Southfield, seriously, I used to rent books like during winter. Man, I would go check out like 12 books because I'm a voracious reader. So I used to think about, days when it was snowy and you didn't get out. I just read books. This was before we had streaming services like Netflix. Tells a lot about the society or about me, right? And I would check out books. And sometimes I had a case that I had to cart them around in. And luckily for me, Southfield Public Library has something that you can just drop the book so you don't have to go in. That works for me because it could have been me who didn't return library books. And then there would have been a warrant issued because you didn't return. It's theft of rental property. Jesus, I need to go check this out if my kids have any library books. No, seriously. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that something that someone should go to jail for? I'm not hearing you all. Where are my people? I don't believe that. I believe there's some things that we're overtly criminalizing people for. I think we're criminalizing offenses that do not pose a threat to the safety and security of the public. That's my thing. Do you see what I'm saying? So somebody who is smoking weed all day, you're just smoking weed. I think you're crazy and stupid to be engaging in a behavior that nothing good is going to come out of that. What? You're just going to feel high. When you feel high, you do dangerous things, right? You might see things written on the walls that don't exist. So I don't believe that you should go to jail and spend your life in jail. And here's the thing with that. When you come out of prison, it's a life sentence. So they might give you 2 years, you come out in 1 year, but you're done. You might be physically free, but you're shackled to a system that now you are dispossessed and disenfranchised. You can't find work. You can't go back to school, right? You can't rent a place. You're condemned to living in poverty. I think we need to stop that part of it. Now, there has to be a distinction between how you go to jail. And I know that there's a movement nationwide to remove bail bonds. And I agree with that, because I think a lot of poor people are in jail because they couldn't make bail. So they might have done something that got them pulled over, or they drunk at a bar and they had a barroom brawl, and people were drunk and stupid. When you get drunk, you act stupid, right? Seriously, you act funny and crazy. So the cops come, they take you down to county, but guess what? You can't post bail. So you end up sitting in the system and rotting away. We're overly criminalizing stuff. We probably need to revisit it and examine it. So when the Oklahoma governor, who is Republican, by the way, and I know it sounds surprising for a Republican governor to actually think this way, but you have to look in terms of, we've been talking all week about population, and you have to look after a while and step away from your own agenda, step away from your party politics, step away from your ethnic politics, step away from your own preconceived notions of how life should be for people, and look at the bigger picture. You're not an effective leader if you keep looking narrowly at this one group of people, this one block of the population. You're not being effective. We've seen that over and over again, right? And what happens is that when you look at the big picture and you start looking at it and you say, wow, this impacts so many people's lives. Because here is a girl who, and we won't even talk about the people who go to jail for mental health. Let's stick with the drugs for a minute. So here's a young woman, right? She's 21 or 22, smoked some weed and acted crazy, right? And she got pulled over. They found her with some weed. And guess what? She goes to jail. That's where that war on drugs thing came from. The war on drugs resulted in mass incarceration of people. And what it did was, after a while, you start to look at it. People come out of jail and they become habitual offenders because they can't subsist out here. They can't survive. It used to be that it only happened to people of color, especially Black and Hispanic people. Turns out, guess who this whole thing, it's a dragnet. Guess who it's affecting? Poor whites. So whites in rural communities, right? And those on the fringes of suburbs and rural communities, those whites who smoke their little meth, cook their meth back there, and smoke and drink and act funny and crazy and stupid, end up going to jail. And while they're in jail and they sober up, when they come out of jail, they can't work, they can't do nothing. So now what? Now you got to understand who I am. I'm not an advocate for the bad guy, right? I'm not an advocate for some gun-toting human being who thinks he needs to walk around with a gun to make him feel good and then go hurt people with guns. Those people need to go to jail. That's exactly the point I'm making. We need to make a distinction about what is a survivable offense. Meaning, if the person given enough time can survive this, then they don't need to serve time for that. Do you see what I'm saying? And who is it up to determine what is rehabilitative or not? Well, we have a dangerous set of precedents that some people who go to jail for sexual assault, for rape and murder, and people who go to jail for beating people up. Some people just get off on that stuff, right? People who like to rob banks and hold up business places with guns and shoot people at gas stations and so on. Those people need to do time. They're not rehabilitative. Why? They need to go somewhere where they sit down for years and think about what you have done and how you have hurt others and yourself. Those people need to do time, right? So now let's talk about people who go to jail for mental health offenses. You know those, you've seen those, right? What they did was they took mental health provisions out of budgets in the counties and states nationwide. So what happens now is that people who are bipolar or who suffer from some mental health disorder, we don't, as community members and as family members, we don't have any other recourse but to call the police. When the police come, what do the police do? They take them down to jail. So they end up serving time because at the time when they committed the offense, more than likely they were not on their meds, or due to all the changes and revisions in the public healthcare system, they don't have access to their medications anymore. And those people end up serving time. So when they come out of jail, where are they going to go? Go back to family? Family is afraid of them. Do you see what I'm saying? We're criminalizing situations. And instead of criminalizing the act, we're criminalizing the person who does not need to be criminalized. Do you see what I'm saying? We need to revisit this. If Oklahoma can do this, California has done a tremendous job. California has led the nation in doing that. In California, for instance, they found out, I heard the story some years ago, they found out that people were going to jail for 20 years for writing a bad check. Who did they hurt? Are you going to get uptight and say that's some moral failing? What's wrong with you? Are you human? People were going to jail for 20 years for writing a bad check and then coming out of jail and can't do anything. Some of those kinds of things people shouldn't go to jail for. Give them community service and then expunge it from their record. Are those the people who are likely to be habitual offenders? I think we need to look at the people who are most likely to commit dangerous crimes. I think that's what we need to figure out. That's what our smart thinking. And when I say smart, I'm not necessarily referring to being smart. I'm just saying our intellectual capacities should start looking at people and designing systems that will eliminate the truly dangerous, the dangerous from among us, and criminalize that, send those people away. The jails are filled with people who have committed low-level offenses. But for the grace of God, I've heard that's over and over. Recently, I heard a woman who is an attorney, right? Now, she's white, upper middle class. So let me give you her demographics so you understand and put this into context. She's white, upper middle class. She's an officer of the court. She is a lawyer. Her son has committed numerous drug offenses. You know what she said? She said if she weren't her son would have been in jail. He's taking drugs much to her dissatisfaction, much to his own destruction, because he's still in his early 20s. He's going to grow up one day and become 30 and realize how much of his life has been damaged by drugs. This is what I'm saying. You see now what I'm saying. So when you look at it in the big picture, the person who is in their 20s and early 30s really have nothing to judge and base life on. They think that right now in the moment, that's life, right? They think that, oh, I can just do what I want to do. And what I'm doing right now is just what I want to do. And this is how I'll always feel. So just leave me alone. They have no clue that they're going to wake up one day and they'll be 35, want a better job, want to change their situation, want to change their circumstances, and won't have the ability to do it because they're hampered and shackled by a criminal record that cannot be displaced. So now you can't apply for a job and so on. Right here in Detroit, I believe, I'm not going to say where because then that will give you some idea, but in Detroit, there's a homeless colony of young white people. Are you listening to me? Who range anywhere from 18 to the mid 30s. A homeless colony of white people whose family have literally abandoned them, right? And they are subject to being trafficked. In fact, there are people who probably have taken advantage of them. They are drug addicts. Most of them have prison sentences and prison records that cannot be erased. They've done time. When they come out of jail, their families want to have nothing to do with them. They end up being homeless. They have a whole colony. How they live through winters is something beyond my wildest imaginings. This was brought to my attention about 2 years ago. And it blew my natural born mind. I could not believe it. And what happens with them is that when I asked, well, what happened? What did they do? Did they kill anyone? No. Did they murder? No. They were mostly young people who took too much stuff up the nose, smoked too much, drank too much, ended up in jail with a prison sentence that has criminalized them. So now their families don't want to have nothing to do with them. Some of them, their families don't even know where they are. And they end up at the mercy of others. We are spending way too much resources criminalizing people. Now, I'm not talking about prisons for profit, people who run prisons just so they can make a profit off other people's discomfort. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that we need to examine why, who goes to jail, and under what conditions do you go to jail. That's what we need to talk about. We need to find out, who are these people? Why are we sending so many people to jail? Do you see what I'm saying? It used to be, I would say, it's not my problem. I don't have relatives like that, right? That's what I used to say. It's not my relative. Okay, it's not my problem. And then, guess what happened? I began to notice that it was taking place around me. It was people who had children. It was people whose brothers, people whose sisters, people whose friends, right? People whose nephews, uncles, and it started to make me think, wow, maybe we are going overboard in criminalizing folks. You see what I mean? And so when you look at it, even people within the system will look at it, and there's some people who are really hardcore. There's some people for whom prison is the only place where they can be. There are people like that. Prison is the only place where you keep them there, and they can't interact with the public. This prison should not be a place for the mentally handicapped, for people who have mental health issues. They need to be institutionalized in a separate place where their mental disorder is treated. When my mother was alive, my mother used to tell me that so often. She worked at a local hospital, and she used to say that when they were taken into the hospital, within 24 hours, they would run back out on the street. She said sometimes they ran out with just the hospital gown on, running down the street. You know what I mean? Because as soon as they pump the drugs into them and they get the drug that brings them back to some level of normalcy, they realize where they are, that they shouldn't be here. We probably are spending way too much. We really need to look at why Oklahoma has done this and model it in other places. Think of states that have high prison populations, like down in the South, right? You're Russian. Are you in Russia? I don't know what the situation is in Russia. I can't speak to it. I've never really done a study on prisons in Russia, right? But think of this. There's some states in the South, for instance, where incarceration rates are high because of poverty. So somebody is driving, he can't afford car insurance. He probably hasn't renewed his tags. He doesn't have enough money to renew his tags. Is that something people should go to jail for? Do you see what I'm saying? So he can't renew his tags, and he gets pulled over, and he goes to jail, and he can't make bail, and they languish in prison. A lot of women are in prison, not because they killed their boyfriends or slapped him upside the head, but they're in prison because they have mental health issues. And something happened and they snap, as we would say. You've seen that show on TV, Snapped? Not cheaters, snapped. And they go to jail, and they don't know where they are, and they're not treated for it. Do you see what I'm saying? We really need to re-examine this. We probably need to look at how Oklahoma has done this, and it shouldn't be a stretch to think it can be modeled or emulated in any other state. California has done a tremendous job. There's a movement here in Michigan to do it. And I believe the president's office is looking into, has a special office within the presidential executive branch apparatus. He has appointed some folks to look into some of these issues that impact people. We really need to take a second look at it. Now, I'm not talking about, some people are saying, well, if you've done the time and they're out, then you shouldn't run their criminal background check and so on. I am not comfortable with that because, like I said, there are some people whom I want to know who I am associated with. There are some people there's some crimes that I don't think are seriously rehabilitated. I have met people who perhaps went to jail 30, 40 years ago, and you'd never know, right? They're the lucky ones, right? But there are some people whom you really, maybe. There's some crimes, for instance, that people just seem to can't get past, like rape. People who have sex with children, those are proclivities. Do you see what I mean? Serial killers. Would you be comfortable with a serial killer being expunged? Not me. No. Somebody who has murdered, some crimes, you can say, well, it was a crime of passion. He killed his girlfriend. We're beginning to see that if they killed one girlfriend, they're likely to kill another one. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, experience shows it, you probably need to stay in jail, bud. Right? But things like, oh, well, my friend was smoking and he picked me up. Right? Think about it, my friends, right? My friend was smoking and he picked me up. And I ended up in the car, and then the cops pulled us over, and I don't know what happened. Next thing, you're serving time in jail because of possession. I don't know what the standard is in terms of how many grams. That always confuses me because it varies by classification. I get confused with it. I'm not a lawyer. I get confused with that. But when you think about some of these things, though, recently I became aware of certain offenses, certain situations that could criminalize people. For instance, driving without a driver's license. Now, I don't know who's so brave to do that. Personally, I don't know why anyone would do that. I don't know, because I'm always thinking if something happens, I want them to be able to notify my next of kin. But people drive without a driver's license, right? So that might not land you in jail in some places, but it becomes repetitive. So eventually you have one, and that three strikes law, that three strikes law, three strikes and you end up in prison. Now, like I said, there are some things that clearly the person needs to be disciplined for. I've heard the story of a man when he was young. He robbed a bank once. He went to jail, served 2 years. They felt sorry for him. Oh, he's only 17. Feel sorry for him. He came out. The second time he did it, apparently he has a thing. The third time, the three strikes law caught him. Spent 25 years behind bars for armed robbery. Now, he only told me about the armed robbery part. He didn't tell me that the person whom he was with, who was with him when he was robbing the place, used a gun to shoot the person they were robbing, and the person died. When I heard that, I'm like, excuse me, you did 25 years. You should. No, he's a nice person. Calm, doesn't want to go back to jail, walks the straight and narrow. Good for him. Not my friend. Do you see what I'm saying? Because to me, you actually I didn't know he was going to shoot, but he had a gun on him. Well, the gun was part of the robbery. No, if you are going to rob someone, if you are really sitting there plotting how to go rob someone and you have a gun, you need to go. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why I tell my children, for instance, I don't know about you, but I tell my children, don't get in anybody's car. You don't know what they have in their cars. And the cops might pull them over and they slip something on you and you don't even know it's there, and the cops find it on you and you end up in trouble. People come and say, oh, we're just going for a ride. I'm like, don't get in anybody's car for a joyride. Anything can happen. You have your own keys. Turn your own car over. Do you see what I'm saying, people? Stuff like that. You tell your kids, don't get involved with certain people. I'm like, they don't have anything to lose. Life is a loose cannon for them. They don't have anything to lose. You have a future. You want to have a future. You have to tell your children stuff like that. I tell my children that I want you to have a future. I don't care what other people are telling their children, but you are my kid. I want you to have a future for yourself, because I know life. When you grow up and you turn 35 and 40, you're going to have a life filled with regrets that you never did as much as you should have. So be careful of the decisions that you make in your 20s, because we pay for it when we turn in our 40s. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why I think young people should go to college. I think college should become mandatory. If you live in rural America, I think you should go to college. I think there should be provisions made for people in rural areas to go to the nearest college. Accommodation should be made. I think young people after high school should go to college and block. Why? It keeps your mind occupied. You have less time to sit down and plan stuff. Part of the problem is that a lot of kids are not going to college, and they end up planning things that they start paying for slowly. It's a slow walk up to the age of 28 and 29. You don't believe me? Go look at the average age of incarceration today. It's going to blow your mind. All these young people, black and white alike, black, white, and brown, are in jail. What's going to happen? For offenses that they shouldn't commit, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting in the wrong car, hanging out with the wrong people. We need to be conscious about what we're doing. And if talking does not work, you scream and yell until they get it. Because the last thing you want is what? That they pay the price with their freedom. That's what you don't want. Recently, I heard a story of something that happened. And the man who was giving the story was telling the story that some years ago, he had helped the family with the two sons. And he preached to them. He counseled the two boys to stay out of trouble. Go get a job. Go to school. The devil finds work for idle hands. Become involved. Well, what do you know happened? A few years, just about a few days ago, one of them was killed. He was at a club, 25 years old, was at a club, said something, and whatever happened. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where some of this goes to? So if they're not dying, they're in the grave. If they're not in the grave, they're in jail. And it's becoming alarming. Like I told you, there's a whole colony of young white people in the city of Detroit. A whole colony. It's so under the radar. You know how in LA they have people under the bridge population whom the census can count, because nobody's going down there to count that. I can guarantee you. Right? But here in Detroit, we have people who live in a whole homeless colony, and they're white people, young white folks, for whom their families have abandoned them because you're ashamed to the family. They're ashamed of them. They went to jail, they're strung out on drugs, and they're homeless. So they go from one place to the other until they've exhausted all the shelters. So they just live wherever. I'm not going to say. We've criminalized people. Sometimes some people need a good old-fashioned dose of discipline, home-based discipline. We've taken the power away from parents, and then the society becomes the ultimate discipline factor. And how does the society discipline? A walk down to the jailhouse. So until we go back to the stage where we make parents accountable. You have to go parent your child. Nobody's talking about child abuse and beating your child and robbing them of food. But you have to allow the parent to discipline the child. Because today's children feel like your parents can't say anything to them. They're going to pick up the phone and call 911. So they're pitting against the parent. You can't say anything to me. I'll call 911. You know what I say? Good. That's what I'd say. Well, go ahead and call 911. When they come, I'll just tell them, sign a piece of paper and tell them I have nothing more to do with you. So go with them. Because they ain't going to take me anywhere. And the tides have turned now, because once upon a time, when the cops show up now, they're looking at the child as the aggressor. And cops know how the society is. So they know that children will agitate parents because the child wants to live what I call willful Willie. You know who is willful Willie? They want to go do what they want to do, not realizing that it has consequences. Again, what we do in our 20s speaks volumes in our 40s. Right? We have to be careful of that. This is why I say to young people, so some of you have graduated college, yeah? And you feel like you're feeling yourself. You still are at risk. This is not the time for you to get up and go smoke and drink. I tell young women that. You're out with friends. Do not drink until you're drunk. Can you get drunk at home in your apartment? You don't go out and drink until you don't know yourself. That is careless and irresponsible. We need to stop patting it down and you are free to do that. Stop it. We need to start telling folks that you cannot do that. That is irresponsible because you're not responsible for yourself. If you are so inebriated and so high that you don't know yourself where you are doing yourself a disservice. That means if the police show up, they can lock you up. This is how some people lose their freedom. You want to get drunk? Don't get drunk at your friend's house. Get drunk in your house. Who's going to call the cops then? But you can't. Do you see what I'm saying? We have allowed what we think is freedom to color our own visions and color our own opportunities because we think that being free means I can do what I want. That's a lie, baby. There are consequences. I'm free, sure. I'm free to the extent of the law. Where does the law intersect with me? That's how far I'm free to. And where does that happen? Nowhere, because this is the law and this is me. I don't have any room in there. Right? And so some of you are saying, well, Harry, does that mean we just stay within the lines, our color within the lines? Well, do so at your own risk. I'm not a lawyer. Do so at your own risk. Do you really want to find out where that intersection occurs? No. A few days ago, the state police here in Michigan are having coffee with a cop sessions. I think they're doing one in Berkeley this morning, right? And I was kind of joking like, right? But if you don't think this, we probably should engage with police officers and ask them what they think. Now, you'd be surprised sometimes what they think. I remember years ago, I was in a forum talking about domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And one of the persons on the panel was somebody from the sheriff's office in the county where I was, right? And when we talk about what happens and the police process and where that intersects with victim advocates and victims' rights, and I asked this question. I said, can I just ask a question? Like, can I just ask, when the perpetrator, is done acting foolish, right? And he goes to jail and he's locked up. And now he realizes what has happened to him. I said to the cop, I said, do you all ever talk to them? Like, what is said? And the cop looked at me. He took him a minute. And then he said, you know something? He said, one of the things that we find is that people don't know their rights. People don't know that there are resources out there to help them. He said, when they start talking and start mothering up, man, this happened and so on. He said, well, you could have gone to so-and-so and you could have, and people are like, dang, and I end up in jail and find out that this could have happened. See, the more you know. So somebody develops a problem with drugs. And here's the thing with drugs. I tell folks, don't start it because drugs are seductive. And everybody always, what is the number one thing when you tell someone not to smoke? What do they say? I can handle it. I have it under control. That is the greatest lie ever told. Because there's no such thing. Drugs, you don't have drugs under control. Drugs have you under control. Right? And so when you tell someone, don't smoke weed, don't do the white stuff, the powder stuff, don't take opioids. You tell them don't take pills. You tell them. They laugh at you because they're so in control. They think they're in control. Right? And so for those people, they need rehabilitation. Rehabilitation can help them. Why? Because we know how, anybody ever been around drug addicts? We know how drug addicts are. I was watching a show. I had one I was dealing with. And believe me, she exhausted me. Because I didn't realize the extent to which drugs can go into someone and stay in them. I mean, it does not quit. And drug addicts will lie to you. And I didn't know that. So they take advantage, they're manipulative. They take advantage of your sympathies. And she was lying, and I was trying to help her. By the time I became aware of it, she didn't want to talk to me anymore. Well, yeah, because I caught you in your lie. You really don't want to be free of drugs. You like it. You see what I'm saying? Those people don't belong in jail. They need rehabilitation. You see what I mean? That's criminalizing something that is errantly wrong in their chemical makeup. They have too much chemicals in them, and the chemicals have overtaken their body functions and their mind. That's a different thing. Do you see the difference now? Same thing with alcoholism. You shouldn't send them to jail. You need to put them in a detox facility. We need to, and 90 days does not work. Say 90 days does not work. Let's just be clear. They go in there and think it's a holiday. They say whatever the counselors are telling them, they just repeat it by rote just to go through the 90 days and come out. 90 days does not work. No, I am not saying that the society should be required to treat drug addicts and alcoholism. No, that's up to the individual. It's you who took at the end of the road, unless they are forcing you to do it, like in the cases of human trafficking, where people are injected with heroin, so they have no choice, right? If you were just out at a party and your friend told you to take it and you know you shouldn't touch it, but you still did it, and now you're addicted, you need to make the first step to come clean. That's up to the person. Nobody should be responsible for that. But what I'm saying is, where the intersection happens with going to jail, they shouldn't see prison sentences. They should be sent to mandatory drug treatment facilities that is longer than 90 days, because 90 days does not work. And then give them community service so they feel accountable, so they're held accountable, but not criminalizing. First time offenders, how many? Well, it depends on what is the crime, because if somebody kills for the first time, I'm not going to call that person a first time offender. That's a killer to me. So first time offender is somebody who probably, after driving without driver's license, right? Then they drive on expired tags. Then they didn't make a court date and a bench warrant is issued. You see how it quickly ramps up? First, they were pulled over for driving without a license or expired tags or some kind of a thing like that, that probably doesn't even attract a misdemeanor. But because they missed a court date, maybe the court notice was sent out late. I've seen cases like that. So that does happen. The wrong court date, right? Or they just decided they're not going to go to court. So a bench warrant is issued. That's what you see now why people like me just stay within the law, because you're like, dang, I don't want to be driving in Pennsylvania or something. You get pulled over and something. And you're like, I didn't even know that. You see what I'm saying? So it ramps up really quickly. Those are the ones that should not be criminalized. People miss court dates. Some people are willful. Some people just don't go to court. Right? They probably need to be brought in and be disciplined. Make them pay a big fine and hold them accountable to it. Because needlessly criminalizing them is not to the benefit of the society. Because now they're going to have a record. We have to talk to young people. Do you know what a criminal record is? You have to tell people, do you know what that means? That means you can never do this. You can never do that. You've heard the story of Judge Mattis, the guy who is now a judge, but who had served time. In today's world, that doesn't happen anymore. That was a long time ago. He got lucky. They don't even allow people to finish GEDs. Once upon a time, the state of Michigan would allow people to finish their GEDs and do college courses in prison. They stopped that. Yeah. Right? So now you're on your own. I kid you not. You're literally like on your own. So is that what you want? I don't think so. Right? So I think that, when you look at it summarily, I mean, it's a good thing that Oklahoma is taking the unprecedented step of commuting these sentences. They carefully looked at these people. They didn't just gloss this over, right? They carefully looked at people. They looked at what they have done since they've been incarcerated and said, you know what, these people deserve a second chance. No, that's a second chance. Second chance is not giving you a chance to go do this and you do it over and over and over again. No. That's a second chance. They give them a chance to go. Now you can go back, pick up your life where you left off, start it over again. Stay away from bad company. Stay away from people who are likely to lead you down the garden path. You see what I'm saying? I don't know, people. We got a lot of work to do. We can't just mass send everybody to prison. Everyone does not belong in prison. The people, we should save prison for the people who are truly evil and dangerous. People who believe in mass shootings and people who want to murder people, people who want to poison people, like that man you see on the news. What's his name? Frazee, who recruited his mistress, his sidekick, to kill the girlfriend, the baby mama. It is what it is, right? It's still the same thing, and killed her. For what? Because you wanted to break up with her, then break up with her. To me, that man he's a stone cold killer. The girlfriend participated in it. She is what? A killer. She shouldn't be out. She doesn't deserve 3 years out. She's a killer. She participated. She cleaned it up and didn't call the cops. The minute he called her and told her, you got to come clean this up, she should have been on the phone with 911. Go check this out. Do you see what I'm saying? She's a killer. You'd be surprised. People. Right? Do you think it should be done? I think so. I think there are some people. I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think everybody. No. There are some people for whom a second chance to start over is good. And there are some people who should not see the light of day. There are some people who, for the grace of God, you ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, you deserve to learn a lesson. Have you learned the lesson? You spent some time in prison. Now you come out. This is your second chance. You don't come back here. That was the message the governor felt that needed to be conveyed. And I totally agreed with that. I totally get it. There's a lot of people sitting in prison. Right now in Michigan, the population is over 1 million people sitting in prison. Many of whom probably have, like retail fraud, for instance. A girl goes into a store, a guy goes into a store and steal goods. That person needs some help. But somebody goes in and brandish a gun and so this is, whether they say this is a holdup or the minute they pull out a weapon, you need to go sit down somewhere for a long time where you don't have access to the public. I kid you not, right? This is some serious stuff to think about. It's some serious stuff because people do serious things, and some of these serious things result in loss of life. And if someone's life is lost, we need to really look at that. If it's not done in self-defense, it's done because you sit down and planned something. Like this guy killed this woman on Thanksgiving Day who had just had a baby. If you want to leave her, you'd leave her. People going to a gas station and see somebody wearing something that they want and you shoot them for $20. People losing their lives over $20 or $50. You're going to shoot someone because you want all the money they have on them, which is probably 20 or $50 because people don't walk around with a lot of cash anymore. You see my point? Right? Food for thought, people. As usual, food for thought. Some serious food for thought. Go look up the story. It's quite the story. That was quite something. I was quite amazed at it, right? Thank you so much for joining me on this broadcast. Today is Thursday. I keep thinking it's Friday, but it's actually Thursday. It's still Thursday, right? Still Thursday. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to hearing from you, seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Freaky Friday. We're going to talk about equity and energy. I think that's what they have planned. Next week, we have some interviews and so on. So thank you so much, everybody. Be blessed. Have a safe travel. Safe travels. Safe travels. I-96 going west. Stay out of it. 94, 75. You know them. Thanks so much, everybody. This is Harriet Kamek with Down to Earth.